The city streets were harsh, unforgiving, filled with noise, rush, and endless faces that passed by without a second glance. But there was one man who stood at the corner of an alley, wearing tattered clothes and eyes that had seen too much. His name was Sam, a man who had lost everything. Once, he had a family, a home, a life. But now, he was nothing. It was a cold winter evening when the man with the dark suit walked by. His name was Thomas, a CEO of a rapidly growing company, his life as polished as his shoes. But there was something about Sam, something that made Thomas pause for a moment, a fleeting moment of humanity. Thomas had everything he wanted: money, success, power. Yet it didn't fill the emptiness inside of him. It was at that moment that the idea took root. He'd fix Sam's life. Or rather, he would make Sam disappear. "I'll pay you," Thomas said, his voice low but firm, as he stepped closer to Sam. "Take the money, disappear from this city, and never come back. I'll make sure you never need to worry again. Just vanish." The words cut deep, but Sam, desperate for an escape from the life he was trapped in, nodded. It was a deal. With the money in his pocket, he walked away that night, a man who had nothing but now had a way out. But little did Thomas know, this was just the beginning of a story that would come back to haunt him. Years passed. The world changed, as it always does. Thomas's company grew, becoming a symbol of wealth and success. But something inside him was always restless. He had the empire, but not the happiness he thought he'd find. He wondered about Sam. Where had he gone? What had he done with that money? Was he still alive, or had he vanished into the shadows, just like Thomas had wanted? The answer came one afternoon in a boardroom filled with tense faces. The CEO was late, and when he finally entered, his expression was more serious than usual. His eyes scanned the room before they landed on a man standing at the head of the table, a man he never expected to see again. Sam. But now, he wasn't just a homeless man. He was well-dressed, confident, and his eyes no longer held the hollow emptiness they once did. He was a completely different person. Thomas froze. The room grew silent. How was this possible? "What are you doing here?" Thomas asked, his voice trembling. Sam smiled, a smile that was both distant and knowing. "I've come to take over." And that's when it all hit Thomas. Sam had used that money, not to escape, but to build a new life. He had worked, struggled, and fought his way back from the depths of despair, using the very money that Thomas had thought would bury him. Sam had rebuilt himself from nothing, and now he was standing in front of him, ready to take the company Thomas had spent his life building. The room was silent as Sam spoke again, his words slow, measured. "You gave me the chance to disappear, but you didn't realize I wasn't disappearing. I was just waiting for the right moment to return." Thomas could hardly comprehend what he was hearing. The man he had abandoned, the man he had paid to vanish, had turned into the very thing he never expected. He wasn't just a man with a second chance. He was a force that had risen from the ashes. Sam didn't take revenge. He didn't come to destroy. He simply took what was his. And as the years had passed, Thomas realized that the man he had tried to bury had not only rebuilt himself, but he had found the strength to take something from Thomas that he had never expected. His company, his pride, his place in the world, but it wasn't about power anymore. It wasn't about wealth. Sam had found peace in a way that Thomas could never understand. He had learned that the real value of life wasn't in money or status, but in the strength to rebuild when everything seems lost. And in that moment, standing in front of Thomas, Sam didn't look like the homeless man he once was. He looked like someone who had everything. Thomas, now the man who had everything but nothing, sat in that chair, defeated, not by a man who had taken from him, but by the realization that he had lost the one thing he had never appreciated, the ability to grow, to change, to fight for what truly matters. Years later, Sam's company flourished, not just because of his business acumen, but because he ran it with the heart of a man who had been broken and rebuilt. And every year, Thomas would see his success grow, and in the quiet moments, he would remember the man he had paid to vanish forever. But Sam hadn't vanished. He had returned, stronger than ever, with a lesson that Thomas would never forget. Sam's eyes, hollow and tired, reflected the pain of years spent on the streets. Every wrinkle on his face told a story of survival, of hunger, of loss. Once, he had a family. Once, he had everything. But life had torn him apart, leaving him with nothing but memories of a past he could never return to. The city passed by, him without a second glance, a cold and heartless world that refused to acknowledge his existence. For Sam, each day was a struggle, a fight just to stay alive. His clothes, torn and ragged, hung loosely on his emaciated frame. His hands, once strong from years of hard work, were now weathered and worn, trembling with the weight of the years. Yet, there was an innocence to him, an unspoken purity that had not yet been completely extinguished by the harshness of his life. He never asked for help, never begged for anything. All he wanted was to survive another day. And then came Thomas. A man with a suit so perfectly tailored it felt like the world had been built around him. Thomas had everything Sam had lost, everything Sam could never dream of. But when he looked at Sam, he didn't see a person. He saw a problem to fix. He saw a way to get rid of the pain in his own heart by solving someone else's misery. "I'll pay you to vanish," Thomas had said, offering a sum Sam could never imagine. It wasn't just money. It was an opportunity to escape, to be free of the streets. But Sam didn't ask for a life like that. He didn't want to disappear. He wanted to live. He wanted a chance. But with the weight of his hunger and desperation pressing him, Sam accepted. That night Sam took the money, but not because he wanted to disappear from the world. He took it because he had no other choice. The innocence in his heart, the hope that someday things would get better, was still alive. But for now, he couldn't see any other way. The city didn't care about him, and neither did Thomas. Yet, somewhere deep inside, Sam believed that even after all the pain, all the suffering, he could find a way to rebuild. He wasn't just a homeless man, he was a man with a soul still, capable of growth, of change. And though Thomas had tried to erase him from existence, Sam wasn't done yet. For Thomas, life had always been about power, control, and wealth. He had built his empire from the ground up, but as his success grew, so did the emptiness inside him. He had money, a beautiful house, a successful business, but something was missing. He had never questioned his choices, never wondered if there was more to life than just building an empire at the expense of everything else. But everything changed the moment he met Sam. The homeless man, with eyes full of pain and resignation, stirred something inside Thomas that he didn't understand. In that brief encounter, Thomas made a decision that seemed practical, even logical: pay Sam to disappear. It was a transaction, a way to remove a source of discomfort from his life without dealing with the deeper implications. Sam wasn't a person to him. He was just a problem to solve. When Thomas handed over the money to Sam, he felt a sense of control. It was a simple fix. Sam would vanish, and Thomas could continue with his life, unbothered by the guilt of seeing suffering on the streets. But what Thomas didn't realize was that in doing so, he had made a decision that would alter his own path in ways he couldn't foresee. Years later, when Sam returned, changed beyond recognition, Thomas was faced with the consequences of his past actions. The man who had once been a symbol of hopelessness now stood before him, powerful, confident, and ready to take what was his. Thomas was shaken, his mind racing as he tried to understand how this could be possible. But it wasn't just the shock of seeing Sam succeed. It was the realization of what he had done. Thomas had seen Sam as nothing more than a problem, a disposable figure. But in that moment, standing across from Sam, he began to see the deeper truth. His actions had been selfish, short-sighted, and driven by a desire to erase the uncomfortable realities of life. He had robbed Sam of his dignity, but in doing so, he had underestimated him. Sam had used that money, that moment, to rebuild himself, not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually. For Thomas, the realization hit hard. His life had been built on the pursuit of power, but he had neglected the deeper, more human aspects of life: compassion, empathy, understanding. He had seen success as a means to an end, but now, in the presence of Sam's quiet strength, he saw that true success was about more than wealth or status. It was about integrity, redemption, and the ability to change, to rise above mistakes and grow. Sam's return wasn't just a confrontation. It was a mirror held up to Thomas's own soul. It forced him to question everything he had ever believed in. Had he truly been successful if he had built his empire on the backs of others, treating them as expendable? Had he lived a meaningful life if all he had cared about was his own success? In the end, Thomas's moral awakening wasn't just about seeing Sam's transformation. It was about realizing his own need for change. He had been blinded by his own ambition, but Sam's journey, his quiet resilience, was the catalyst that opened his eyes to what truly mattered in life. The room fell silent as Sam stood in front of Thomas, his presence commanding attention. Thomas couldn't speak. He was paralyzed, caught between disbelief and regret. Sam, once a man discarded by society, now exuded a quiet strength that was impossible to ignore. He looked at Thomas, his eyes no longer filled with the emptiness of the past, but with a fire that had been forged through struggle and resilience. Sam's voice was calm, yet it carried the weight of years spent rebuilding himself. "I didn't disappear, Thomas. I rose from the ashes. And now it's my turn to lead." The words hit Thomas like a cold wave. In that moment, all the years of power and wealth felt meaningless. Sam's transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional, a triumph of the human spirit over all odds. Thomas had been so focused on winning, on maintaining control, that he had forgotten what it meant to truly fight for something. As Sam spoke, Thomas felt a deep, overwhelming sense of guilt wash over him. The realization was sharp and painful. This was more than just business. It was about people, about redemption, and about finding the strength to rebuild after everything had been lost. Sam's success wasn't about revenge. It was about proving that even when life seems to have nothing left to offer, there is always a chance for change. And that was the moment when Thomas truly understood what it meant to be human. Sam's determination was palpable as he stood before Thomas, his eyes burning with quiet resolve. Despite all he had been through, the streets, the rejection, the years of struggle, he wasn't here to ask for sympathy. He was here to take what was rightfully his. When Thomas tried to challenge him, to assert his control over the company Sam had built, Sam stepped forward, unwavering. "You can't take back what's already mine," he said firmly. His voice wasn't loud, but it held a strength that left no room for doubt. He wasn't just fighting for success. He was fighting for his dignity, for every moment he had fought to survive. In that moment, Sam's determination was a shield. It wasn't about proving a point to Thomas. It was about showing himself that he had come this far, and nothing could push him back now. He had fought too long, rebuilt too much, to let anyone, especially the man who had once tried to erase him, take away the life he had built. The room was tense, thick with uncertainty, as Sam stood tall, facing the man who had once dismissed him. Thomas, the CEO, tried to mask his shock, but his hands trembled as he looked at Sam. The man he had paid to disappear had come back, not as the broken soul he had left behind, but as a force to be reckoned with. The silence stretched, broken only by Sam's calm voice. "You thought you could erase me, Thomas. But you underestimated me. I didn't vanish, I transformed. And now, I'm here to take what's mine." Thomas was stunned, his mind racing, unable to process the impossible. How had Sam, this man, who had once been on the streets, turned into the powerhouse standing before him? But Sam wasn't just a survivor. He was proof that with enough determination, anything was possible. In that moment, the air seemed to shift. The room, once filled with doubt, now hummed with the energy of possibility. Sam's journey had been long and painful, but it had also been filled with resilience. It wasn't just about the company he was about to take over. It was about showing that no matter how dark things get, there's always a chance to rise, to fight, to overcome. Sam's presence in that room wasn't just a confrontation. It was a living, breathing testament to the power of transformation, and as he spoke, everyone in the room felt it. This wasn't just a man reclaiming his life. It was an inspiration that anything could be rebuilt, no matter how broken it seemed. The tension in the room finally started to ease as Sam stood firm, his gaze steady but his voice softer now. After everything that had happened, the struggles, the betrayal, the pain, he had arrived at this moment of clarity. He had never expected to be here, to face the man who had once dismissed him as nothing. But somehow, despite it all, he had made it. Sam looked at Thomas, who had once been a towering figure of wealth and power, now crumbling under the weight of his own guilt. The arrogance that had marked Thomas's every move had vanished, replaced by uncertainty. The man who thought he could control everything now found himself powerless. And it was in that silence that Sam finally spoke the truth that had been with him all along. "I'm not here to destroy you, Thomas," Sam said, his voice calm but unwavering. "I'm here because I believe in something more. I believe in the power of second chances, in the belief that we can rebuild no matter how lost we feel. You tried to erase me, but all you did was create the space I needed to grow. And now, we both have the chance to change, to be better than who we were." It was then that the weight lifted from Thomas's shoulders. He realized that Sam wasn't standing before him to gloat or to take revenge. He was here to offer redemption, a chance for both of them to rebuild, to learn, and to move forward. For the first time, Thomas understood what true strength was. It wasn't in holding on to power, but in letting go of the past and embracing change. The clarity that Sam had gained through years of hardship and self-discovery now illuminated the room. He didn't need to fight for revenge. He had found peace within himself. His purpose wasn't to tear down, but to rebuild, to rise above the darkness and create something new from it. And in that moment, it became clear. True success wasn't measured by wealth, but by the strength to rise again after life has knocked you down. Thomas, for the first time in years, saw hope, not in his empire, but in the possibility of transformation. Sam had not only saved himself, but had offered him a chance to see the world differently. With the weight of his past choices beginning to fade, Thomas knew that this was the beginning of something new for both of them. It wasn't about power anymore. It was about redemption, about choosing to live with honor, and about finding peace in the wake of mistakes. As Sam turned and walked toward the door, leaving behind the man who had once tried to erase him, there was no anger in his heart, only the knowledge that he had come full circle. He had saved himself, not by revenge or destruction, but through the strength of his spirit. And with that, he left the room not just as a man who had risen, but as one who had found peace. The future was no longer uncertain. It was filled with hope, with clarity, and the understanding that no matter how lost or broken someone might be, there was always a chance for redemption. And with that final realization, Sam knew that his journey had only